The newest hammer we've got is an ultralight hammer. It's got a even bigger hole in it to speed up lock time even more. It's got a relocated strap pin hole to more within Gold Cup specification. Lessens the amount of power that the hammer spring gives to it. And then it's also got a narrow half-cock notch. That way, if your hammer failed to half-cock, you won't damage your sear nose and ruin your trigger job.
Is this one cast or?
This is a fully machined part out of tool steel. And that's the best part we have right now.
So that's the top of the line hammer?
Yeah, that's the top of the line hammer.
How do these work in relation to the sear?
Okay, one problem we run into, or we used to run into, is people would call in and say that they thought their hammer was too short. Whenever they drop an older commander style hammer in it, it wouldn't cock whenever you'd cock the slide back. And I've got one right here that's I just dropped into it a while ago, and it's an older hammer that we use. And if you notice, whenever you cock the slide back and let go of it, it follows the slide back down. And we've had a few calls about that, and we thought we'd just clear it up for people. If you have one that's like that, there's not any problem at all with the part itself. It was oversized in the hammer hook area.
I know it was made by design, so that would give a gunsmith.
Right, it allowed for more room and extra fitting to allow for the overcocking of it. Now your overcocking, when the hammer or when the slide comes back and pulls the hammer back, if it's overcocking, it'll push it quite a ways back, and when it comes back forward, your hammer hits your sear, rams your sear real hard. That over a course of time will destroy your trigger job. It's like that, and the extra material was there so you could fit and have just the bare minimum amount of overcocking on it. Now this hammer here, when you push it all the way back with the slide, it's not engaged into the hooks right now. But you can take your thumb, just barely pull the hammer back. It takes just barely a little bit, and there it's engaged.
You hear it click.
Right. Now, it's not that the hammer's too short or anything like that. What you've got, if you look on the sear block here, you take a sear and hammer, what it's doing when it's not cocking is it's getting to about right there as far as the slide's letting the hammer go back. Okay, if you removed extra material from the front of your hammer hooks, in this area right here, if you move this face back towards the back of it, you'd end up with it dropping, with your sear dropping in like it should.
And you're talking just a little bit of material.
Yeah, very little amount.
Just a couple file
Yeah,
marks.
some of them might be worse than others. All guns vary, and most of the time, they'll drop in anyway. But they are, a little bit oversized, or used to be oversized, just for that reason. But now, on all of our current production, we've kind of phased out the thicker, hammer hooks and everything. So, now you shouldn't run into any problems like that. All of our hammers should basically drop in and work like they are.
Okay, so for the current production models, you really just need a little fine adjustment then.
Right, just polishing of what you've already got. Okay, I've got an investment cast hammer here, which is the standard number 9 hammer. This one is the newest ultralight that's fully machined from tool steel. Now, as far as trigger jobs go and the quality of the trigger job you'll get just as good a trigger job out of a cast hammer as you will out of the tool steel hammer that's been fully machined. I've never noticed any difference in how long they last or anything like that, So one part's just as good as the other when it comes to the trigger pull aspects of it.
And you've probably done thousands of trigger jobs.
Yeah, I've been doing it for 7 or 8 years. So we've been using these longer, than we have these. But as far as your trigger pull, if you know what you're doing, you can come up with the exact same thing. This just gains you more, and gaining a lighter trigger pull with the relocated strap pin hole, and makes it a little easier actually to do a trigger job. But you can get the exact same effect out of this hammer here. Okay, what we're going to do here is a trigger job on our commander we've got, and we'll be using 3 of our different parts, swapping out into it. We'll be using a 299 Deluxe hammer, and a 314 Deluxe sear, and a number 190 ultralight trigger.
Okay. What's the first step? What do you want to change first?
Okay, first let me talk about our parts a little bit. Our ultralight trigger, compared to a steel trigger, you get a major advantage in safety from your trigger trying to bounce back under recoil. On our sear, it's a fully machined sear out of A2 steel. It's made to our dimensions, and cut on the same angle I cut them when I do them in the shop here. They're a real high quality part, and our hammers, we use them also. They're a much higher quality part than what you get from any of the Colt. We make them to our specifications. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to prep the hammer.
Okay, what do you got to do that?
Okay, let's go over to the vise. You want to just snug it up in there, not very hard, because you could break it. And what I'm using here is a file from Brown Nails that I've got. It's a hammer cutting file, and it's got 2 safe edges on it. And what you're going to do first is cut your bottom flat first, making sure you keep everything square.
So you're squaring it up, huh?
Right. It's already pretty much square like it is, but the only way to be sure is to cut it yourself and check it like that. And then you'll want to cut the face of the hooks right back here to make the corner square. You're going to take the same amount off each side, keeping everything as straight as possible. You want to remove the least amount of metal as possible to clean up all your machine marks. And then after you get that cut and looking like you want it, you need to go and cut the height of the hooks down. Now we don't recommend you go below 18 thousandths or 20 thousandths. Just cutting the height of them down. You get into a lot of safety problems if you go any lower than that. So first thing you need to do, they usually come a little bit taller to give you plenty of material to work with. And we'll cut them. Some people, you could use a feeler gauge to lay on top of it to cut them, but you can eyeball it too.
Cut both those at the same time,
right? Right. You gotta be sure you keep both of them the exact same height. And that's one of the most important parts in cutting those, is keeping both of your hooks at the exact same height. If you don't, you'll end up with trigger creep. You know, if they're not the same height, you'll almost always get trigger creep. And
how do you measure it too? What if the guy was at home doing this? How would he know that it is 18 thousandths?
you could use a feeler gauge just to lay on top of it, and you know, you could actually cut down to it. After you get that done, it's a good idea to break this back corner back here. You end up with a real sharp corner there, and it helps smooth everything out when it's cocking itself. And then you'll have to take your old hammer and knock the pin out of it.
And you're putting that pin back in?
Right.
With the hammer?
Mm-hmm. Trying to get the strut back into it. Okay, here we've got a feeler gauge here that you can use to check the depth of your hooks. This one's a 21 thousandths gauge, and you can lay it right down on top of there and see how close you come up with, and that's right around 20 or 21 right there. And you could lay it on there and cut it down with a file, right down to it to be precise.
Right down to the feeler gauge?
Yeah, right down to the gauge itself. And then you want to take your hammer pin, make sure it goes in, it's not too loose or anything like that. Make sure there's not any burrs anywhere inside the hole. And if that goes in all right, you've pretty much got everything done to your hammer for now anyway. And from there, we'll go on to the sear. What we'll do is we'll cut the nose on a sear jig.
What do you got there?
Okay, this is a Tom Wilson sear jig that we got from Brownells. And it's an adjustable jig where you can adjust the amount of angle you've got on your sear. And I use a medium Arkansas stone, the right size for it to cut the sear nose itself.
Okay, so you just lay the sear right into that jig?
Yeah, you lay it right in there, and it's got a set screw in the back inside of it there that adjusts how much your sear tilts in and out.
So you almost really need this sear jig, huh?
Yeah, it's very important. You just about got to have it. Now, as far as your angle that you use, that's kind of up to you.
Right.
You know, some people use more or less angle on. This is what we've come up with over the years.
So there, let's see the part. Let's see how it fits in there.
Well, you've got a set.
Okay.
You've got a set screw right there
Yeah.
that adjusts to adjust for the angle of it.
Okay, very slowly. And where's the sear? Let me see the part.
It's here.
Okay, what are you doing? You're sticking it into the...
Okay, it's got just a sear pin like in a gun that holds the sear in place. And then
What are you trying to cut off?
okay, what you're cutting is your face,
Okay, just hold still right there.
the face of the sear.
And just a little bit, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's just not very much.
You're just going to make it level with that sear jig.
Right, that keeps everything working like it should. And we'll use a feeler gauge in between this to keep everything going straight. Okay, now we're going to cut a sear nose, and the angle we use is basically a stock Colt sear angle. All we're doing is polishing it up, putting a higher polish on it, keeping the exact same angle that it is. And as you do your trigger job, you may need to back the angle off or give it more angle to suit the gun, to see, depending on from gun to gun what you have.
So you're really not taking any metal off, you're just kind of polishing it up.
Right.
You're using what kind of stone there?
Using a medium Arkansas stone. And I put a little bit of oil on it to make it last longer and cut better.
Okay. How many times did you run over top?
Just a few times. And that's pretty much all it takes there. You have to be careful and keep everything nice and square. Okay, I've just polished the end of the sear nose just a little bit, keeping the same basic angle that it had, which is real close to a Colt sear angle. You want to keep everything nice and level across this way. You don't want to have it too much or too less. You want to be able to get good contact between the sear and the hammer hooks. You've got a real sharp edge
like
on the bottom side. Yeah, it's similar to a burr, and it's you need to take that off to get good contact with your sear and your hammer. We just take a number 2 cut pillar file that's wide enough to cut it. We stay with this angle here, which is basically flat with the bottom part right here. And we just cut a small flat on the bottom of that to even everything up. Usually doesn't take very much. And that's something that you can vary too while you do the trigger job. You can cut more off of it if you need to.
Depends on how it feels.
Yeah, depending on how it feels. That has something to do with how it breaks, how the trigger breaks. And then I take a pretty fine polishing stick and polish that bottom flat where I've cut it with a file. And then that's about all you can do for the moment. These sears are finished out real good in these areas. On the legs of it, front and back, they're already polished.
They come polished out of the bag?
They come polished out of the bag. Now, a lot of the times a regular Colt sear will have burrs kicked up along this edge here where the sear spring rides on it. And it sets on there like that. You need to get your surface nice and flat and smooth there. And you need to get the back of it nice and flat to where your disconnector sets on it nice and even. All the old Colt sears were all machine parts. They were, pretty good quality.
So you were able to work with the older ones?
Yeah, you could work with the old ones pretty much, and they were pretty good quality. You just had to clean them up a little bit, knock the rough edges off of them. And all the new current production 80 series guns have stamped steel parts, cast parts in them. And they're not real good to work with. That's why we switch this part out into it.
They won't hold an edge and they'll get a lot of rough spots on them, and it's a lot easier to use the Wilson.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to use a part that's already finished out like it should be to start with. Okay, this trigger only weighs 80 grains,
Yeah.
Which is a lot lighter than the factory trigger is. Now they're using plastic and steel combination, and all the older ones use solid steel triggers.
Right.
And so now, what you got when you go to a light trigger like this is you don't get much of your trigger bounce that you would with a solid steel trigger, which could trip your sear and make your hammer fall under when you're dropping the slide. Okay, the only thing it needs is a small flat cut on the back surface here from basically here down. And what that does is whenever your trigger's all the way back, it keeps your spring, your middle sear spring, from touching your sear. Keeps your trigger from pushing your sear spring off of your disconnector, which sets right on top of it like this.
So you cut it down a little bit.
Yeah, because your disconnector will set basically right here, and from the end of the disconnector down, you need to cut a small flat onto it to clear the sear spring.
Don't you have one already done there?
Yeah, I've got one here that's already been finished, and there's what you have after you get the flat cut on it. And then after you get that cut, you need to chamfer the inside edge of the trigger. Out of the bag, it'll still have a sharp edge that runs up the entire circumference of it. So what you need to do is you need to take a small file and a polishing stick and just lightly break this edge in here, run it up so far, so whenever the bow's inside the mag well, when you put a mag in it, your mag won't. If it does move around in there somehow or another, it'll kick up past it. It won't hang up on it. Okay, on the trigger here, to get it fit to the frame, you've got to take a little bit of material off the top and the bottom. The shoe comes oversized, so it'll fit in a variety of guns. That way you can tailor fit it to fit, as loose as you want it, I guess, or as snug as you want it.
How do you go ahead and take a little bit of that off? What do you use?
Okay, we just use a regular mill bastard file, and you could set it in a vise if you wanted to. I usually just hold it in my hand and just cut a little off the top, and then you roll over and cut a little off the bottom. And then you can put it back in the frame and check it, and if it still doesn't go in all the way, you can remove a little bit more, but you want to remove the same off the top and the bottom both.
Okay, so you want to make sure you're even on both sides.
Right. Take the same amount of strokes off of each.
And when it fits, should it fit tight, or should it be kind of, should it just drop in, or should you kind of have to force it a little bit?
It should drop in, but you should have just virtually no up and down play in it. If you get everything fit just right, it'll just drop in from the top, but it won't have any noticeable up and down play in it.
If you turn it upside down, would it drop out?
Yeah. If you took too much off, you'd end up with a lot of excess play up and down, and that makes your trigger feel really bad. It's got a lot to do with how the trigger feels. A Colt trigger, just a stock trigger, has a lot of up and down play in it. The idea on everything is to keep everything in line with everything, and everything square to everything, and keeping that from moving up and down as much as possible just helps, in the reliability and the complete workings of the trigger. Okay, and one other thing you might watch for after you get the trigger fit into it, making sure the bow isn't bent too far in. If it's bent too far in, it'll stick out into the mag well, where you'll have it catching on the magazine. You don't want to have it sticking out their end all. When it fits upright, it should lay completely flush with the sides. Yeah, the stirrup itself, you want to make sure it doesn't stick out into the frame.
And if it did, would you bend it in or bend it out?
If it did, you could spread the sides back out, being real careful with it, because they're easy to bend. Once you get it right, it shouldn't ever have any trouble with it after that.
Okay.
And then from there, we can go on to the prepping the disconnector. And I've got one that's finished here and one that's not.
Are these both Wilson parts?
These are the factory Colt parts. Okay, the first thing you need to do is to remove your disconnector is cast in all the new guns. Some of your old Colts have got machine parts like the Sears are. The newer ones have got cast parts in there that will have casting ridges and stuff.
Just like that line right there you pointed out.
Right, yeah. You can feel it. And they'll have them up on top. They'll basically run the complete length of the disconnector, right over the top and down the other side. And what you need to do is, on this surface here, you need to polish this out. It may take a file to get the worst part out. And then once you get the worst of it out, you can just take a polishing stick and polish it till it's nice and flat and nice and smooth. You don't want to remove any more material than you have to.
Right, so you really just kind of polishing out the burrs and
Right.
the ridges.
Right. And then after you do that, you've got a corner right here on the stock disconnector. You can see it. That corner there could possibly stick out into the mag well when it sets in the gun. To prevent anything like that happening, any problems with it interfering with anything, we usually just round this corner off a little bit. You don't want to remove too much metal and make it too thin.
Right.
You want to keep the strength of it. But you just break that corner there. It doesn't take, just very little amount.
You just file down with your hand in a sense, right?
Right. You can do that at the same time you're polishing this flat here. And then after you get that done, you can go to this back part here. And this is the part that the spring itself lays on. And you can see the marks here from where the spring had been riding on it right there. And you want to just take a file and just remove just as small amount as possible off of it to clean it up and just polish it out with a polishing stick. And then you have to do the same thing to the end of it. Up here you've got casting marks that run all over the top of it from one end to the other. And you want to be really careful here not to remove too much material, especially off of the top of it.
Now where's that resting again?
This would set right inside this disconnector slot here. You can see right there where the disconnector rides in it right there. And if you get it too short, it won't disconnect right.
Great.
And
Good. So now overall, once it's done, what do you do from there?
once you get everything polished on it and everything, then you just keep moving on to different parts. Like this is 80 series gun here. It's a good idea on the 80 series levers to take and polish the sides of them just a little bit in case they have any kind of burrs or anything kicked up on them.
That's just a pretty simple polishing stick, and you're just kind of
Right, just rubbing it over the top of it and
just clean it up a little
and
bit.
just
right?
clean it up and smoothing things out. And then it's a good idea to take a real fine stick and polishing this top surface here where it engages the plunger and slide. You don't want to remove any metal, but just clean up any imperfections it might have. And that gets those ready. So we can go to the spring now.
What's usually the case with these springs? What seems to be the problem from the factory?
They put a lot of tension on them from the factory for reliability reasons and things. It's got a lot of arc in each of the springs. The first thing you need to do is take a polishing stick and lightly radius this edge here and this edge here where they contact the disconnector and the sear. That
Not a file, just a polishing stick.
Yeah, just a polishing stick. It doesn't take but just a very little bit. And you just break that edge there. And then what you need to do is to adjust your spring. Now, it's got a lot of tension on it like it is. And you want to be careful not to take too much off.
Too much of the tension off.
Especially at first, because then you can adjust your spring tension later on when you're doing the trigger job and adjusting the poundage and everything. But you'll need to support it down here with your thumb or something, and then you can just put a slight arc back into the spring to where it's backed off quite a bit.
So you're bending it backwards.
Yeah, letting tension off of it.
Right.
And you adjust a little bit off of there, and sometimes you need to take a little bit off of your trigger return. Now your middle spring is your trigger return, and this spring here is the sear spring.
What's the third one there on the end?
Okay, this one is for the grip safety.
Okay.
Your grip safety comes down on this, and it's what keeps your grip safety pushed out.
Right.
And when you get adjusted, it'll look basically like that. It'll have about that much arc to it, but you can fool around with that a little bit more after you get to working on the trigger, because you usually have to adjust them even more after that. And from there, your original mainspring is heavier than we sell a 19-pound reduced power mainspring, and we'll switch the spring on it completely out.
What's the advantage of going from a heavier to the 19-pounder that Wilson sells?
It'll reduce your trigger pull quite a bit. It makes your gun a little easier to cycle. It doesn't have near as much tension on it when the slide comes back. And you shouldn't ever have any trouble with reliability of it either. As far as as long as you've got good ammo, you shouldn't have any trouble at all with it misfiring. Let me just replace the spring. These springs here are still plenty strong enough. Sometimes you can go down to 15, 16 pound on your spring and still have reliable ignition. But this gives you, plenty of safe margin there.
Okay, so you're just basically swapping that spring straight out.
Right, we'll just replace the spring as it is. Anytime you're compressing a spring like that, you need to put your safety glasses on in case it gets away from you.
Okay.
And just being careful to push it down in there. You might want to put it in a vise to hold it more solid if you need to. And once you get that in there, everything's ready now to be dropped into the frame.
So you want to assemble it back together, then
Right.
what are you going to do from there? Just start testing the trigger pull?
Right, we'll adjust the take up in it, the over travel, making sure the half cock notch functions like it should. Working on the spring tension and making sure it's completely safe. Okay, now we've got all the parts prepped and ready to put in the gun to try to check the function on and everything. Now we can just start putting the gun back together. Start with the slide. Take your 80 series plunger. Now if your 80 series plunger doesn't want to travel up and down in the slide in its hole very smooth, you'll need to take it back out and remove burrs inside of it, or
On the plunger itself? Or inside the hole?
Inside the hole itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll have burrs kicked up in there. If it travels up and down smooth, then it should be just fine. Take some lube, put it in there.
You put a little bit of lube in there to kind of...
Yeah, kind of smooth everything up. And this one here, it runs up and down real smooth, so it shouldn't have any problem with that. Okay, now we can drop our trigger in.
Now that fits just like you wanted it to, right? Just,
Yeah, and it'll drop in, but it doesn't have any noticeable play up and down in it. You may have to go back later and remove a little bit more after you've used it some. It may, try to gall a little bit inside there. Let me take our disconnector and sear. Remember to put your 80 series parts back in there.
slower, so
Mm.
you can get you.
Okay. Then I'm usually going fast. We'll put our other 80 series part in. Drop our hammer in there. And set our sear spring in there. Take our mainspring housing. Slide it up. And you'll want to leave all your your safeties and grip safety and everything off of it when you're
Why
doing the
check
trigger
this?
job, because you can see what's going on a lot better.
Uh-huh.
In case you have a problem with it. Okay, got everything in there. The first thing I always check is make sure your 80 series part works right. Because if you drop your hammer down now, and if the plunger wasn't getting pushed up all the way, your firing pin will damage your 80 series plunger.
Uh-huh.
It runs up and down inside. Okay, your plunger sets in the back.
Uh-huh.
It's at the very end of your 80 series leg. And you can see that when you're looking down in there. And the way to check it is to take the take-up out of your trigger and see if your plunger or your 80 series lever pushes your plunger up.
Uh-huh.
And it should, with the take-up out of it, it should run up there probably 20 thousandths,
You can see
at
the
least,
movement,
yeah. Right. And you need to get plenty of movement in it to make sure it functions all the way. And and this one here, it pushes it up far enough out of the way to where, as far as your 80 series parts are concerned, it's safe to go ahead and snap the gun.
Okay.
And the next thing I usually like to check, to see if your hammer drops into your half cock, or your hammer drops into the sear with a half cock here. Now this one here, if it doesn't drop in all the way, right there is where it catches it at. And if you lower it in there slow, if you feel it binding on anything, on the sear,
Yeah.
sometimes if you don't have enough take up in it, it'll bind going up into it. It'll actually wedge itself into the half cock notch itself. And now this one here drops straight in. It goes in real positive. And that's usually a good indication of having enough take up in your trigger pull. That'll give you a good place to start.
You worked on that when you were working on what part again? Take up?
If you have the take up out of it, everything, your 80 series plunger should be pushed up out of the way, and then if you drop it to the half cock, it should just fall right straight into the sear should fall straight into the half cock notch.
Okay.
And you also want to check it while you've got it to see if your screw in your trigger is adjusted in too far. This will affect the over travel of it. Now if it's in too far, right where your half cock notch and your sear cross paths, you'll feel it bumping it. You should have complete freedom, with your hammer going all the way down, all the way back. You shouldn't be able to feel anything.
Right.
But if you feel it right in there, it's usually your sear bumping it. And when it bumps it, if it bumps it, you need to adjust your trigger screw back out.
Yeah.
because you've got it in there too far. Then once, this one here, it's got plenty of clearance on it now. Okay, now once you know that your A-series parts work like they should, and that your hammer's not bumping the sear, and that you've got plenty of take up in it where it goes into the half-cock notch like it should, and then you can snap it a few times, dry fire, and see how good or bad your trigger feels at that point. You usually always want to cycle it with the slide. It'll feel different if you just thumb cock it.
Oh, really?
With your hand.
And how's this one feel?
Got a little bit of creep in it. It's still pretty heavy. It's got quite a bit of trigger return tension. We can still take a little bit of trigger return off of it.
So what are you going to do now to do that?
To take that off, you'd need to bend your middle spring back a little bit. I think while we're at it, we can go ahead and bend the sear spring itself back a little bit more too. Now, some springs are weaker than other springs. Some of them are real stout. Some of them are weak. Some of them you don't need to take much tension off of them. Some of them you'll have to, and some you won't.
Right.
After we do that, we can put it back in there and see how the weight of it feels. You always want to make sure you have enough trigger return tension that, while you're shooting the gun, it gets dirty or gets a lot of build up in it, that it'll still have enough strength to return it
Bring
properly.
trigger back in the bag.
Right. Yeah, you've got to have enough trigger return tension for that. Now it's noticeably lighter now. It's still got a little bit of creep in it. What you'd want to do is, when it's got creep in it, you might, if you haven't taken a whole lot off of your hammer hooks, off of the depth of them, you might want to remove just a slight bit more there, as long as you don't drop below 18 thousandths. And once you might try that, and then you can also work with the angle of the sear. If you're having trouble getting it light enough, you might want to give it a little less angle. If you don't have enough angle to it, your hammer hooks will just slip right off of your sear, and you'll have trouble with your engagement and having the hammer follow when you drop the slide. It doesn't take very much at all to change what your trigger feels like. Very little effect on the sear nose will go a long way. Sometimes it's maybe something real slight that you might do that'll completely eliminate the creep altogether. Another thing that's real important too is that you have good contact between your sear and your hammer hooks. You need to have both hammer hooks contacting the sear the same amount
Both those
on
guys.
each side.
Yeah.
Right.
It's got to be the same amount of metal taken off.
Right. You've got to have everything perfectly square. The same goes for the legs on the bottom of the sear. If you don't have if the legs aren't square there, you'll end up when you pull the trigger back, your sear is being pushed from one corner and not both sides at the same time, and then you'll end up with it trying to creep then. Anything like that will always cause creep. The same way with your hammer hook contact. If only one side engages, then usually it'll always make it heavier. It'll make it a lot heavier than it will with two.
Oh, really?
It doesn't seem like it would, but if you've got both hooks with full contact, it'll actually improve the weight of it. Okay, we're just taking the gun apart, and we're going to check the hammer hook and sear nose relationship in a Brownell's hammer and sear block. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure I'm getting contact on each hook the exact same amount. You can also tell by looking at the end of the sear nose for wear marks and stuff. And this one here is just a little bit out of square, so I'll go over to the jig and square it up just a little bit and see what that does. And we'll check in our sear block again,
Now, what are you looking for?
see how our contact, make sure we got equal contact on the sear nose. And make sure we got good clean engagement on it.
Now, when the hammer falls, show us the action. What actually happens? So you pull the trigger and
Okay, when it comes out, it'll just barely break, and your trigger screw and your trigger will stop your sear right out of engagement if it's adjusted right. And when your hammer comes down, it should just barely clear the top of the sear nose.
Uh-huh.
And when you've got that, you've got exactly what you need to get the correct over travel and stuff. Okay, now we'll get our trigger screw put in the trigger. We'll get our over travel adjusted on it. We'll have to put it all back together now.
What about lubing the hammer hooks?
Yeah, we can lube. Need to be sure and lubricate everything real good so you can tell exactly what's going on. You just want to be sure your upper 80 series part is back in there. I mean, if it clears to start with, you can go start by turning your screw in a few turns, and then checking. Now I've got adjusted too far, and you can pull the trigger, and it's adjusted so far that the sear can't even move out of the engagement. So what we need to do is back it up a few turns. Try it again. Now it's coming out of engagement now, but it's bumping the half-cock notch right there. It's actually stopping it.
the trigger pulled.
You actually see just barely catching on it. So we'll still need to back it out. Just to slide them out. And it's still, it's not as bad as it was, but still just barely bumping it. Now it's not bumping it. Can't feel it bumping at all. And at that point, if you haven't unscrewed it too much, you can play with it back and forth to make sure everything's set right.
Now, if you unscrew it too much, what's the situation? What's it feel like?
You'll have excessive over travel. Yeah, the trigger. And this way you've got the least amount of over travel as possible with everything cut like it is. At that point, oil it up real good.
So what kind of lube are you using there?
Using Ultima Lube. Just lube all the parts up with.
And you're not using too much, but you're using enough to get them all working well, right?
Right.
I like that syringe adapter. Can help you get in a small place.
Yeah, it works real good for that. And I believe we pretty much got what we need. Now we can check on another gun we have here on safety checks after you've had the trigger job is complete. First thing you need to do is lock the slide back on it, and as you hold the trigger forward on it, you want to drop the slide to make sure you got good engagement. This will give you an actual check between the sear nose and the hammer hooks.
So the trigger, you hold the trigger down.
Hold the trigger forward.
And release the slide.
And then release the slide.
And what are you
You
looking
do that a couple of times. You're looking for the hammer to follow. If your hammer drops and you're holding the trigger forward, then you've got a hammer hook and sear nose problem.
So basically what you're doing then is you're holding the trigger out.
Right. Holding the trigger, keeping it from moving. Because if you checked it without holding the trigger back to start with, it could be trigger bounce, tripping the sear. And that wouldn't let you know if it was your engagement or not. And this way, if you just hold it and release it, that lets you know that you've got good, safe engagement.
Good.
And then after you do that, then you can check by not holding the trigger at all, just keeping your finger off of it, holding the gun fairly loose, and dropping the slide, and checking to see if your hammer drops. You don't want to do it too many times, and if it's unsafe, it'll usually let you know it fairly quick. And if you do it too many times, you end up with your hammer slamming forward on the sear nose and taking everything out of, actually ruining your trigger job
That you just did.
that you've just worked on.
Okay.
So you don't want to do that too many times. And then another thing you need to check, you need to take a dummy round or if you're out on the range, you can take a live round and put it in there and drop it down without your trigger or without your finger on the trigger.
Right.
And this lets you know if again it'll drop. And it feeds and works just like it should. To be perfectly safe, to have the ultimately safe trigger pull, you've got to be able to drop a live round or drop your slide down on a live round pulling it out of the mag and without your hammer ever falling to make sure it's perfectly safe. And if it'll do that every time, then you've done your part right. Okay, we've got trigger weights that you can adjust. These are NRA official weights. And we can start here with, say, 3 pounds. You need to be sure you got your grip safety depressed or it won't fire. You need to set it right in line with the weights, right in the center of it, and slowly lift it up. Now that didn't break it there, so we'll go to put a quarter more pound on it. And cycle the gun again. Try it again. And just keep adding weight till it will drop. Don't forget to push your grip safety in. Now there, it just started to pick it up. So what you've got there is be kind of in between a 3 1/4 and 3 1/2 pound trigger pull.
Great. That's kind of where you want it to be for safety?
For safety, you want to leave it, at least 3 1/4 to around 4 pounds is what we like to set them at in the shop. Unless you've done a lot of trigger work, you shouldn't be trying to set one under, 3 1/2 pounds. That's the safe limit, range to stay in for an average person. Okay, now we're going to fit an extended safety to our commander here. The trigger job's already been done to it, and the grip safety's already been fit. You really need to have both of those things done to it before you fit the safety. The safety should basically be the last thing that you install on the gun. One of the first things I need to talk about here is I've already modified the safety we're going to put in it. I've modified the pad by narrowing the pad and rounding it off, since this is going to be a carry gun.
So you made it smaller for carrying.
Right. So you don't want it to get, you want to be able to, have it big enough to use it, but you don't want it to get in the way,
Right.
When you're carrying. Now this is a part.
Out of the package, yeah.
Out of the package, this is a part as is with nothing done to the pad on it. Now, out of consumer demand, we've made the pad wide like this. Most people now shoot with their thumb resting on the pad, and they want something, nice and big and flat they can put their, rest their thumb on.
That's for the competition shooters and stuff, right?
Right. And so it's big enough you can basically do, anything you want to with it. You can shape it however you'd like, and it's also got enough clearance on the inside from this area in here to clear for a thumb guard. So you don't have to modify your safety to use a thumb guard with it either.
And to cut that down, you use just a file or?
I use a belt sander, but you could cut it down with a file or whatever you happen to have. And then I've just polished it out. Polish the corners on it real good, and polish the front of it to where it just make it more comfortable.
So it's smoother and kind of looks nicer too.
Right. And to actually fit it, you'll want to leave your grip safety out of it to fit it. That lets you see what's going on inside. Gives you a little better idea of what's going on. The first thing you want to check to make sure there isn't any kind of burrs or anything along the inside face of it that could scratch the slide or keep it from going all the way down. We'll just clean this one up here just a little bit. And then you might want to break this inside edge right here so it won't be putting heavy scratches like this one's already got heavy scratches from the stock safety.
It just rides on the frame, huh?
Right, because it has a tendency to ride on it right there. So we'll just knock that corner off. That'll cut down on the amount of scratches you get.
And that's the polishing stick just to kind of finish it up.
Yeah, this is just smooth everything up. And then once you get that done, you can go ahead and set it all the way down in there. Now, it's not going to go in all the way at first. The fitting part, the actual fitting part of the safety is the pad in here. It's this part right here. It's what has to be fit to the sear.
Okay, so that rests against the sear.
Right, it rests right against that flat part of the sear. You can see in there where it's laying on top of it right now.
That's what actually engages the safety then.
Right. And you want to cut enough material away to where it'll ride and lay right up against the sear.
Right.
You don't want to have any pressure on it to where it's moving it or anything, but you do want to have it to where it's laying right up against it.
So you want some full contact with it.
Right. You want to have as much contact as possible.
Okay. Okay, so now you're actually working the trigger there, right?
Right, I'm letting the trigger break, and you can see the sear riding up and down in there, and that's what actually fires, trips the hammer. And so when the safety goes up, that prevents any rearward movement.
So the safety would go up and that would push that piece of metal down.
Right, it'd keep it locked in place where it's at.
All right, so it's not going to fit usually right out of the bag. You've got to just
No,
cut it down a little bit.
they'll never fit right out of the bag. I've seen, guns where people just drop them in there and literally force them in there to try to make them work, but that's not a very good way to do it. One thing you can do is usually you can work the safety back and forth, putting pressure down on it to where it rides against the sear, and that'll actually put a mark on the inside of this.
So that'll give you an idea where to start filing down.
It's hard to see where on this stainless part, but you can also tell by looking in there too. It's exactly how much material you need to see.
Right, but a blue part you'd be able to see like a little scratch on the bluing.
Right. On a blue part, or, you could put Dicom or something on there to make it show up a little better. The best thing to do, as far as getting the correct angle on the safety, is to use your old safety as a pattern.
So use the factory safety.
Use the factory safety that you're taking out. It's already got the correct angle that has to be cut, because you have no reference point as to where, how far up or down you need the flat in their setting.
So does that vary from gun to gun too?
The angles usually stays the same.
Right.
They're always usually pretty close to the same. And as far as how much you cut off, that varies quite a bit. That's why you want to have your trigger job finished before you fit it, because you want your sear setting right where it's going to be forever.
Right. Let's see the factory trigger compared to the part you're about to stick in there, see if we can get an idea what kind of angle you're going for. Okay, rotate it just a little bit more. Yeah, that may work right there. Okay. So you really got to cut a notch in there. Is what you're doing,
Right. You're just cutting
Let's
a relief.
A pointer in there. Can I just hold them up real quick? Is this the notch you're talking about right here?
Yeah.
You got to cut this
Yeah, you
piece.
got to cut. You got to cut that piece there out.
So you got to make it look kind of like that.
Yeah.
So you really can use this one as a pattern.
Yeah, you don't want to use it as a depth pattern because, the variances in the safeties themselves. But, yeah, when you do a trigger job, you probably change where the sear sits.
Mm-hmm.
And so it probably doesn't have the same relationship to the safety as the original had to it.
Because all those parts interact.
Right, everything works together in there.
Okay.
And now all you need to do is, after you're doing a while, you just kind of know what angle to cut them at. But you can,
It seems to cut pretty easy.
yeah, stainless doesn't cut really as good as blue does, but you can see just how close it's
A little bit there.
right there we're gaining ground on it now. Yeah, you want to just remove a small amount at a time, especially if you've never fit them before, because if you take too much off, it's hard to put it back on. You can always
So,
take more off.
If you take too much off, you're basically buying another part.
Yeah, if you get too carried away, you will. It's got to fit. It's got to fit perfect.
Well, this is the one area, the safety, which really needs to work every time, right?
Right. You don't want to have any kind of play whatsoever in the sear when the safety's on, because depending on how much engagement you've got and everything, there's just no room for error in that. And you just basically just take a little off and recheck it, and you don't want to get in too big a hurry on it.
What are you looking for?
I'm just checking to see just how much we like. Right now, if you push in on it, it's trying to go up on it like it should.
So you're real close.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close.
Yeah, so you can't stress enough when it's to go slow and keep trying.
You really don't want to get, in any big hurry on it at all. You want to take just a little off at a time. I can tell pretty much myself after doing so many about how much to take off. I take quite a few strokes at a time off, but if you haven't done it, you might want to, you definitely want to slow down and take
Now
your
it's-
time.
It's
Now
in
it's,
the place there. Is that
yeah,
clear, or
it's-
is it too much pressure still?
still way too much pressure on it. You really don't want to be able to feel it going up.
Uh-huh.
It's just got to be a perfect fit. I mean, it's got to slide up past you where you can't feel it, but it's also got to lay right on the part.
Show us the wear mark.
You can see here where it's starting to show a wear mark. That also gives you an idea of how close you are on your angle. Gives you an idea. You want to have the wear marks around the full width of this area right here. So if you've got more wear down here, you need to tilt your angle back just a little bit so it'll bring everything together. Now I'm just going to take the wear mark off and then recheck it again. And it's still, you can see it's put a wear mark right back in the same place. It's bearing down pretty heavy right there. Now it's starting to feel a lot better now. You can tell where your wear marks. You can always tell where your wear marks at.
How's that feel?
You can still feel quite a bit of tension on it. At this point, when you get that close, you really just need to take one file stroke off at a time to make sure that you don't get too much cut off of it. Okay, one thing we need to make perfectly clear before we go any further on fitting it is to make sure that that you go slow, take your time, and do it upright. That's one of the most important parts of the safety on the gun. I mean, that controls the complete safety of it altogether. If it's not right, you shouldn't use it at all. You know, once you've taken too much metal off, you're going to have to get you a new part. You know, and you also can't go and put your old stock safety back in it, because after you've done a trigger job, it probably won't work right either.
Oh, really?
So, you know, there's just no room for error at all in there. So we'll go ahead and finish this up.
So you're doing like 1 or 2 strokes at a time, right?
Right, just taking a little off at a time. You can see now the wear mark is all the way across there now.
And that's actually where the sear
So
is.
that's the correct. You now got the correct angle of exactly how it needs to be. Now you just need to stay on that same angle and just remove a little bit at a time.
So by seeing that full wear mark, you know that you've got full engagement with this sear.
Right. That lets you know that everything, you know, your angle's right in relationship to the sear. And just work it up in there a few times. It's better to have more pressure on your sear when the safety's going up than it is to have too much material removed off of it, not having any. You know, it's acceptable to have a small amount of friction when the part's actually going up. You can feel it when it gets to the upper part. You can feel it trying to slide up on that part.
Right. Now, is that safety going to make a positive click at some point?
No, it'll just eventually free up and go up all the way. You're probably better to stop before you get, you know, all the way and let it, you know, work itself in.
Right.
The rest of the way.
Versus
And
have to flop around, yeah.
Right, after you use it a while, it'll work itself in, but we still got a little bit too much pressure on it right now, so we'll go ahead and take just a little bit more off.
And a lot of it's just is how it feels, right?
Right. Now, we're close enough right now, we can probably go ahead and just take a polishing stick and just lightly hit the front of it. Your polishing stick will remove a little bit more too, so it'll help the way it fits. So now we've got it pretty much where we need it. You can still see it's got the contact in the, the full distance of it there in the middle. And at that point you've got it fit to the sear. Now what you need to do is to get it, you need to, one thing I like to do is to clean up the very front of the safety. This one here, it barely does bump the front of the plunger tube.
Right.
So it's a little bit long. You don't want to take too much off of it, or you'll remove your detent that you've already got in it altogether. So we'll just go over to the file to the vise and remove just a little bit, just to clean up the front of it.
Okay, so hold on 1 second here, Jack.
Now we're going to clean the face of the safety off just a little bit to remove any casting marks or anything in it. I put a towel here in the vise to protect the serrations and everything on the pad of the safety. You don't want to snug it up too hard or you'll squish it. You want to stay with the angle it's already got. That pretty much gets that cleaned up there. Now it clears the plunger tube like it should. You can put your plunger spring assembly in there and go ahead and try, see how well it works up and down. You want to make sure it engages the detent when it's all the way down. Probably can't pick it up with a camera, but with it all the way down, it's fully in the detent. I'll make sure you don't have it too light going up. You don't want it to accidentally kick up while you're shooting it. You don't want to have it too light going down, or while you're carrying it, you might accidentally bump it off. So, especially since it's a carry gun, you want to have it, plenty heavy enough for what the purpose is. One thing sometimes you might need to do is to knock this sharp corner off of the bottom of it right here where the plunger snaps over.
Just gonna round that
Just
off.
going to just lightly break the corner.
Let me do that so it'll kick off just a little bit easier.
And this will make it kick off just a little bit easier and make it a lot smoother. And a little bit goes a long way on this. Now, with that done, you've pretty much got it fit as far as dropping it in there. To check the safety, you need to push it up all the way and pull the trigger. Pull it pretty hard. Watch for any movement of the hammer itself.
So you're just gonna see if the hammer moves at all?
Right. Watch for any movement, and after you pull it back all the way, pull it back with your thumb and see if you can hear any kind of a clicking noise. If you hear clicking, it's what's happening is your sear is coming out of your hammer hooks part way. And when it comes out part way, they might rest on the top edge of the hook, and then when you pull it back, it just pops it back in there. And if you have any kind of sear movement at all, you just have to start all over again. Okay, now we've got the safety fit to it. You can see that point right there. Here's your sear. You got your safety engaging your sear. You see you've got full contact there. If you pull the trigger back with the safety engaged, you shouldn't have any movement at all of your sear.
So there's the trigger moving on the right side.
Right, you can see the trigger moving, but your sear is not going anywhere.
Plate becomes completely blocked.
Yeah, it's completely blocked.
Now go ahead and drop the safety real quick. Let's see what happens when you do that.
And when you drop the safety comes out of the way of your sear. And that lets it go on past.
Okay. Now what do we have? We have another part.
Okay, I've got the original Colt part that came out of it. I purposefully took too much material off of this part right here, the fitted part.
Okay, hold it still. So you took it down as for a demonstration.
Yeah, I cut it down just to show what happens if you take too much metal off and what to look for. If we put it in the gun and check it the same way with the safety up,
Okay.
you pull the trigger, you can see the sear travel. Pull the hammer back, you can hear it click into place. You pull it, you can watch it. Watch
It's
it.
moving just a little bit up, huh?
Yeah, you can see it drop back down a lot easier.
Yeah. It's very slight movement, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very slight.
No movement's acceptable.
You can't have any kind of movement at all. No matter how slight.
Right.
No matter how slight it is. If it moves at all, it's no good.
Now this may actually function, but it's really not safe.
No. The gun will fire and everything, but when you put the safety on, it'll be totally useless. You won't have a safety anymore.
Tell them that
Okay, if you don't want to have any kind of movement whatsoever to start with, if you cut an excessive amount off, and if you don't know what you're doing and don't know what to look for, you end up with a case. Well, on this one, we've cut even more off than we did before. You can look down in there and actually see the clearance you've got, for one thing.
There's a lot of room down there.
There's a lot of room underneath it. Okay, if you pull your trigger, you can see how far it travels. It's a noticeable amount of travel you've got there.
So it really is moving.
It's really moving. But the worst part of that is that you can flip your safety off and your hammer drops.
Right.
Now, if it was to miss your half cock, it'd go off just by flipping the safety off of it. You gotta do is pull the trigger and drop it.
And that's all
And
because
drop.
you cut too much off
Right.
the...
It's come so far out of the engagement that when you drop the sear, it just goes ahead and lets it go. It goes ahead and lets the hammer drop. So that's the worst case you could run into, pretty much.
Put the right one back in now.
You don't want to have any movement whatsoever. I mean, you can't stress that too many times.
You put the...
You can pull the trigger and drop it. Everything works fine. Nothing moves. You pull the hammer back. You don't get any. You don't hear anything like the sear trying to jump back into the hammer hooks or anything. And if you got that all done right, you've got it fit pretty much. Now, the other thing you need to watch out for is like a lot of times if you put a match barrel in a gun, you'll end up with your slide sometimes setting further back than it originally did. You've got to have this notch right here. This notch here has to clear your safety. Now this one here has got quite a bit of clearance. Actually, it has enough clearance on it already. You want to have at least 25 to 35 thousandths clearance. That gives you a little bit of movement. That way, if your gun gets real dirty or while you're shooting everything and it happens to be setting, maybe not close all the way, you can still let you get your safety up so your gun will be safe. The clearance that we're talking about is the clearance from the face of the safety here to the notch in the slide. It's this area right here.
And if that didn't fit in there,
If that didn't fit in there, you'd have to take your slide off and take a narrow file like this, and then just go in there and cut this flat straight down till you've got enough, the proper clearance.
so you wouldn't cut the safety itself, you cut the
No, you don't cut. You don't want to take it off the safety. You just want to take it off of the slide itself. Since this one already has enough, we'll go ahead and just leave it alone. One other thing you might want to do for cosmetic reasons is you might want to spend time fitting your safety to the frame more. Fitting it up. You can see the lines. This one here fits real good, to be dropped in.
Right, it's pretty close. Huh?
It's pretty close like it
What
is.
would you do, just file it down a little bit? Or
Right,
file
just
it
take
down?
a half round file like this and just cut it out, and then you'd end up with this being thicker right in here. So you'd want to bring it all down, cut it all back down to the same thickness all the way across. You want to have the same amount of area or your width in here all the way down to the bottom. If you pull this one up a little bit, you kind of see.
That's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's basically what you're looking for.
So you'd be cutting off the safety at that point, right?
Right, at that point you'd cut off the safety,
Just a
and
little piece of
it's kind of a matter of personal preference of how you want to look after you get the rest of it fit up. From here on it's all up to you what feels comfortable. Some people like to have a lot of cutting done on them. Like this ambi right here, you can see I've brought this corner and chamfered it back up in there, and then brought it on over the top. You've got the same thickness right down here. It's nice and thin. You don't want it real sharp, but you want that nice, and then this will fit up and follow the lines of your frame right down here. Okay, we've just fitted an extended safety to the Commander. Now I'm going to show a few differences between the ambi safety, the two-sided safety, as compared to the single-sided. There are a few little differences in fitting and things you should look out for. I've got one here that's already been fit to the gun. As far as the fitting of the pad to the sear, it's the exact same as what we just did to the extended safety.
same cut,
Same
principle.
cuts, everything's the same as far as that's concerned.
And you just pulled that apart. Is that to screw out? Or is
It's just it just snaps together. They just pop in. You want to have them pretty snug enough that the right side won't, after you use them some, won't loosen up and then be rattling around
Right.
some, because they can loosen up.
You don't want to lock that together. Huh?
No, you don't want to weld it together or anything like that, but and they fit in the exact same way as the others do. You have the exact same, like I said before, the fit to the sear is the same. Whenever you're cutting and fitting it to the sear, one thing you should do always is to put both sides in of the safety every time you check it.
Oh, every time you check it.
Right, because sometimes it might be pulled out a little bit different or something, and with both sides in there, that's the way it's going to be sitting in the gun when you get finished with it.
And you want to have that positive
And
connection.
you want to have the positive, you want to have the same thing every time. You don't want to, have both sides in one time and then just put the left side in, because you may come up with something completely different.
Uh-huh.
And then also on the ambidextrous safety, you've got this leg right here that you have to contend with. And when you're putting your grips on, you need to have a relief cut in your grips right there to clear that when it's going up and down. It needs to have enough clearance all the way up and all the way down.
How would you cut that out, with a Dremel or something?
Yeah, you can use a Dremel. We do it sometimes on a milling machine. You know, you can set them up and cut them.
Do a whole bunch at a time, or just
Right.
But you just want to go ahead and touch out a little section so that the safety has room to work.
Right, you just want to cut enough off. You know, you don't want to go cut more than necessary.
Right.
You may too come up with one that this leg right here actually sticks out quite a ways.
Okay.
This one here fits right where it should. You don't want it riding completely up against the side of the frame, but you want it pretty close where it's almost touching.
So you want a little bit of clearance there.
Right, you want a little bit of clearance, make sure everything slides up and down.
And if it's too far out, can you just
And if it's
bend
too
it back?
far out, you can bend it back. You know, you want to be careful with it. It's a delicate part. It's real easy to bend, so you can bend it back, right where you need it. And whenever you cut your grips out, you just need to make sure that you get them cut out enough to where, it's got full freedom of movement all the way up and down in there. And once you get everything cut right, as far as that's concerned, you should have it pretty much finished up then.
I guess that our grips are already cut out.
All of our grips, like these grips here, these are ours, they're already cut out for the ambidextrous cut.
So they come out of the bag already?
They come out of the bag like that, so you don't have to worry about, cutting our grips or anything. Also, before you do put the safety in, you need to remember to shorten your hammer pins and your sear pin both. These have already been shortened. You want to shorten where they're at least flush or maybe just barely below flush, like these are.
So you're shortening just by grinding them down a little bit?
Right, they're just dome shape to start with, and they won't work. You can't get this side to fit all the way up against the frame unless you cut them down.
Let's see it on the other frame then. Yeah, from-
In this frame here, you can see how far they stick up.
So you'd want to take them out of the gun?
Right, take
pop 'em out a little
them
bit.
out of the gun and just, you want to go slow because it's easy to take off too much, and they won't look good if you take off too much of it.
You cut those
You cut your
down.
pins down. You'll have to do that. Really, that should be the first thing you do before you try to fit it, because when you try to fit it to the sear, you need to make sure and have both sides in there. And before you do that, you've got to shorten your pins.
Right.
And other than that, it's basically the same way as fitting any safety.
We'll pop them together real quick before it shows
Okay.
that.
You work it with your left thumb if you're a lefty.
If you're left-handed, you just work it up and down like that. Both sides should fit, right up against the frame pretty close. You want to make sure with the grip safety in there, you want to be sure you've got, good movement with your safety. You don't want to have it binding up on anything. You may have to even polish these legs right here to make sure they meet up just like they should. And if you're going to fit a grip safety to it, you need to fit your grip safety with the safety you're going to put on it. And then once you get that done, you should never have to worry about that part again. Okay, now we've got to fit the grip safety to the trigger itself. We've already fit the safety to the frame back here, but we've got this leg right here that has to be fit to the trigger mechanism. And you need to have your trigger job, should come first as far as how in order of things that need to be done. You need to do your trigger job first. Then after that, you need to have this fit to the frame like it is. Then you can go ahead and fit your safety to the trigger and get that working right. And then the last thing you need to do is put your grip safety in here and fit this part to the rest of everything else.
And that
all of
makes
it
the
ties
grip
together.
safety
That makes the
functional.
grip safety functional. Right. And all you need to do here is once you've got it all polished out and everything like you want it, you might want to, on this surface right here, you might want to polish it up a little bit to make sure, because that part there has to clear, has to fit in between your lower 80 series leg here and the frame.
Rotate just a little bit back. Okay, look, you see it better?
But
That's gonna fit right into
it's
that
going to
little
fit
slot.
right into this little slot right here. Now, all of our beaver tails now are narrowed for 80 series guns, but they'll also work in a 70 series gun. They'll interchange completely there. And this lower part of the beaver tail, this area right in here, this front surface is where it will contact the trigger, very top of it right in here. That's where it'll contact when it's blocking and doing its job like it should be.
So what do we got to do to prepare that to fit in there?
So we'll just start with polishing this just a little bit, make sure everything.
So you really don't have to take anything off, but you just want to make it
No, it just, there are times when you might, depending on the gun, you might have to take it, cut just a little bit more off of it.
And you don't want to take the length of it then, do you? Or just...
No. Right now, we're going to test fit it to make sure, see where it's at right now.
Okay.
We'll go ahead and drop it in there. Let's see what we have. Okay, now I tried putting the safety in there. The leg of it was a little bit too wide to clear this area right here. What we need to do is remove just a little bit of thickness off of it. Just taking a fine cut file.
We're just going to narrow it down a little bit.
Right, just gonna bring the thickness down just a little bit. Need to take another file and kind of knock any burrs off the edges. We'll try it again and see how it works.
A little better.
Yeah. Okay, we're also gonna have to take a little bit off of the front of it, just a little bit too long. It won't swing down and clear the trigger like it is. One thing we need to do is we need to move this shoulder here back just a little bit to make sure we have full trigger movement.
So we're working on the shoulder, the overall length.
Right now, we're not working on the actual length, overall length of it.
As you're just getting extra trigger travel.
Yeah, we're trying to get extra trigger travel into it to make sure your trigger goes far enough back. Okay, now we're going to talk about how these parts work together before we go any further on the fitting of the grip safety. Okay, when the grip safety is actually engaged,
So deep, not depressed. It's like no one's grabbing.
right, when no one's grabbing the safety, it blocks your trigger and it sets in there just like that
Right.
in relationship to your trigger.
That's why the trigger won't come back.
That's the reason your trigger won't come back. Okay, whenever you depress the safety,
You actually get a grip on the
when you
gun.
get a grip on the gun, it pulls the safety up like this, and then let your trigger travel in this area right here.
And that's the travel that actually
And
makes
this
it
is,
go.
right, this is the travel you have whenever you're actually shooting the gun. Okay, what we run into with this gun is that this area right here is a little bit too long when everything's setting in there in order to actually come down past the trigger here to engage it. It's a little bit, it's setting like right in there right now. It needs to be able to drop down to block it. And whenever we shorten the front of this part here, we also need to lengthen this area right here and move it back some to give us more travel in our trigger. That way it doesn't act as a trigger stop. You just want to move a little bit at first to see, you know, where you get. It usually doesn't take very much, and sometimes it actually doesn't take any, but I've kind of noticed that, you know, when you have to cut the length off, you need to cut about the same amount off of this part here. Okay, your height of where this shelf right here sits is what controls when your safety engages. If this area, if this flat is moved up higher, it will actually, what it does is it takes less movement of the grip safety in for it to be working, to let the trigger travel in there. So you don't want to, you know, you really don't want to remove any material off of this flat right here, you know, unless you absolutely have to. That way you have, you know, full safety of it. You don't want it going off. You know, you don't want to be able to just barely move and then still be able to fire the gun. You want to have it completely depressed all the way before it'll work. So we'll go ahead and shorten the front of this. You want to stay with the angle it's got on it, because it has to set. When it sets in the gun, it has to set flat up against the trigger to get full.
Oh, it is, okay.
To get full blocking.
Okay, so you're close. So you want it to be relatively flat.
Right. You want both your back of your trigger and the front of your grip safety to set flat against each other. We'll set it back in here and see. Okay, we still need to shorten just a little bit more off of it. Okay, now we've got full travel. It's short enough now that it'll drop down past the top of the trigger. We can put everything back in here. Drop the part in. And you need to put your safety back in there. Okay, now what we're running into now is that whenever I first put the safety in there, the back of the hammer is riding up against the front of the beaver tail. And this is something that doesn't happen very often, but you can see right here where the back of the hammer, the radius part of the hammer is hitting that. It's keeping the grip safety from fitting up all the way against the frame and letting your safety drop in.
So what would you do about that?
So we'll just take a file, just cut a little bit off. Just remove a little bit of metal there and put it back in there and check it again. Now it's going in there better now. When I push the grip safety in, it's staying at the bottom. It's not moving free enough. So that means that the leg of the grip safety is still a little bit too wide. It's not clearing lower 80 series part. You can actually see the wear where it's riding up against it right there.
Oh, let me get closer.
You can't really see it actually, it's on its top edge.
It's just too wide right there?
Right, it's just too, the thickness of this is just too wide. And we're still getting a little bit of contact with our hammer up here. So we'll go ahead and cut that off now. Okay, that should give us plenty on that. You want to make sure you don't get your leg too thin.
Right.
You just want to remove what you have to.
Too thin that would make it weak, or that would...
Yeah, it would tend to make it weak. It doesn't really have a whole lot of pressure on it, but it's not a good idea to get it real thin. It was running more towards the top. It's a little narrower up here, and it's wider down here, so you're getting your contact on the leg at the top.
Now, would you file it down a little bit more at the top then, or?
Well, you really want to keep it just flat, but you might have to concentrate more, to whichever side is hitting the worst. Now we've got travel with it. You can get your safety all the way in there. We're still getting a little bit of rub from the hammer. It makes it hard to get your safety end out because it puts a real bind on it.
So it's fairly obvious that it's important to do a little bit at a time.
Right. There's no need in doing any more than you have to. You can always take more off, but you can always put it back on. We're still getting just a little bit of drag on our leg here.
You're always looking for those wear marks, right?
Right. They let you know what's going on. Polish the stick, polish that back up. Take your file, knock these sharp edges off slightly. Should be real close this time. Okay, it's not hitting the grip safety at all. We've got travel there. Now you need to check it to see see if it'll actually work or not when you actually pull the trigger. When you pull the trigger down, it's up there, it's blocking the trigger just like it should. I've got the safety off of it. Pull the trigger, nothing happens with it. And while you're pushing on the trigger, push it in and see just how long it takes for it to engage it. You've got to push it in quite a ways before it'll go. We're still getting trouble from our leg sticking in there.
It's still sticking a little bit there.
Yeah. You see a definite wear mark right there where it's...
I'm going to get close up to that wear mark real quick before you polish it. So, point it out. right there, huh?
Right, it's dragging.
Can you angle it toward me a little bit?
Yeah, I'll get a look at that. Good, hold on. Now that's what's dragging on right there.
Okay, it's where that's dragging at is on this lower 80 series lever here. Now to a point they'll float back and forth in there a little bit, like that one. Will move back and forth quite a ways, and it may always leave a wear mark on it. But as long as you've got your travel in there and it doesn't interfere with your trigger pull or anything like that, it should be fine. And now it's preventing the safety from working like it should, so go ahead and cut. Leave it like that for now until we check it and make sure it's working all right. Now it's pretty much releasing right now. Whenever the trigger is back and it's underneath it, the trigger's not sliding all the way out from underneath that.
So what do you think?
From underneath the leg. It probably just needs polish just slightly. I haven't polished it yet. So now we can probably go ahead and polish this side of it here. Knock the sharp edges off of it. I'm going to knock the edges off on this side. And then just take just the edge of a polishing stick. You can polish this flat, little surface right there. That's where your trigger is riding when it's trying to get out from under it, because your grip safety's got spring tension on it, trying to keep it pushed down all the time. And this has got to slide out from under it.
So that's where it's hanging up.
That's what's keeping it from coming up. It's just a little bit rough. Just take your polishing stick. Just hit it a few strokes there, and
I guess it's important that that's smooth so it doesn't get caught on the little...
right. You want it to operate as smooth as possible. At the same time, you don't want to remove too much off of it to limit your engagement on it. Now you've got it. Release the trigger. It's coming, sliding right out from under, nice and smooth. Your safety goes down. Works free.
It has a little click there, but will that wear away?
It may be. Might check it. Take a little bit more off that leg just to be on the safe side. Put a little oil in it. Okay, now we've got our part in there and everything seems to be working like it should. The main thing to look for is make sure it travels up and down smooth, no hitches whatsoever.
What motion would that be?
Just the up and down, you know,
That's with the hammer drop?
just the swing of it. Yeah, with the hammer fully cocked, you know, you need to check it, and with the hammer down, you need to check it. That'll let you know too if your hammer might be rubbing on the grip safety. If you know if it was hanging up, that might be what it is. You also want to make sure with the hammer cocked onto it's got plenty of travel right there before it breaks. And this one runs, you know, nearly all the way down before it'll break. Right. And you want to make sure with keeping your trigger pushed in that, you know, you can tell actually how much travel you've got by that. Let you know how far it's going down. You want to make sure your trigger slides out from underneath it smooth, you know, no hang-ups or anything. And you know, make sure it doesn't block the leg inside. Make sure it's not too thick and hitting your trigger parts in there, because it may be rubbing up against it just enough to put creep into your gun that you might not have had before. You know, that's a lot of times that's what the problem is. You also want to make sure that you've got it back far enough that you don't have any that you're getting plenty enough trigger travel out of. You don't want to be hitting, you know, half cocked or anything like that. And if it's not getting enough travel, it'll act like a trigger. It'll actually act like a trigger stop. It'll just completely stop your trigger before it gets back as far as it should be. And if it does, all you need to do is move this surface right here, move it back to where you've got more travel between your trigger and your grip safety, back and forth. And with everything in there, and you know, after you do all the safety checks, you're pretty much finished with it.